Without a doubt, the number one statement or complaint I hear from business owners is, I just don't have enough time. If this is something you can relate with or relate to, stay tuned because we're going to talk all about it.
Running a service business can be hard. It is not unusual for business owners in industries like contracting, home repair, auto repair, business-to-business services like janitorial, IT and accounting, and many others to feel overwhelmed by all the priorities facing them at any given time. Between addressing the needs of the customers, managing the employees, figuring out the financials, and getting processes in place, feeling like you're making significant progress on your business journey can be difficult. Welcome to Service Industry Success, hosted by Brian Harding. Each week, Brian will look at real-world strategies for building the business you are dreaming of, while also sharing tactics to get through some of the most frustrating parts of business ownership with a lot more ease. Let's get started.
Telling you about one person who was wished for more hours in a day would be a great injustice. There's just talking about one person who's experienced this just would not do it any kind of justice at all, because virtually every person I work with says this in some way, or complains about not having enough time, or laments that they wish they had more hours in a day. It was just there's a ton of versions of this, but it always boils down to, I wish I had more time. I'd be willing to bet that every single business owner has gone through at least one phase in which they felt there weren't enough hours in a day to get everything done. There are times when there really is just too much to get done in one day, 1 week, or 1 month. And business owners are people. And oftentimes people use a lack of time as an excuse to not face the real culprit, which is generally fear or not knowing how to do something or having to make a tough decision. So, if a business owner is fearful about letting go of control, the chain reaction of events will ultimately lead to the business owner doing things which could or should be delegated, in addition to things that can't be delegated, and voila, the business owner does not have enough time to get it all done because they're trying to do things that they should be doing and doing things that somebody else should be doing, and they really do just run out of time. The problem is, it's difficult sometimes to tell when the lack of time is really a lack of time, and when it's a clever disguise for not wanting to face a fear, make a tough decision, or learn a new skill. This is what we have to do before we start tackling the lack of time problem, is identify if it's really a lack of time or if it's really something else. So, what are we to do? The first thing I would say to do is acknowledge that every single business owner that has come before you has faced these kinds of fears. They may not have faced the exact same fear you face today, but definitely they face one which caused paralysis, indecision, self-doubt, you name it. All right, we all have gone through this. I don't know a single business owner that's immune from having these kinds of fears. So the good news is, and the bad news is, I guess, you're right where you're supposed to be. This is very common, and I don't know anybody who gets out of this business ownership journey without experiencing this. So the second thing I would recommend is determine for you what's really the longest period of time you would put something off strictly because you didn't have enough time if it was something that was important. All right. I know for me personally, if I put something off for more than a couple of weeks, then there's probably an underlying reason I really don't want to do this thing. It's not probably about how much time I have anymore. It's just about, I don't want to do it. So a couple weeks I know myself well to know that if I don't get it done within a couple weeks, that's probably what's happening. So anytime I've been talking about doing something, or I've moved back a deadline to accomplish something, and it's been more than 3 weeks, this is no longer a time issue for me. So what is it for you? Maybe it's not 3 weeks. Maybe it's for you, it's 2 months. Okay, fine. Let's just pick a time. But I'm pretty sure it's not 6 months. It's not a year. It's not 9 months. Most of us, if it's something is important, we're going to get it done in a fairly short order. And again, your time frame doesn't have to be the same as me. Let's just identify what it is for you, though. Now, this is the part where everyone who I have this conversation with says something like, but you don't understand, Brian, I really just don't have enough time. And then I have to explain to everyone that since everybody says that they're different, nobody is really different. We all say the same things when this conversation comes up. The fact is that everybody does get busy sometimes, and they really do go through periods of time in which they're at or beyond their capacity for time. This really does happen. I'm not suggesting this doesn't ever happen. And the fact is that when we have difficult decisions to make, or fears we don't want to face, or skills we don't want to learn, like accounting or a difficult employee situation or something like that, the end result of those instances is that we appear to not have enough time. Both of those things are true. We have to sort out which one we're facing, which one we're dealing with. That is our task before we can start solving the quote unquote time issue, is figuring out if this is really a time issue or if it's really a fear issue or an indecision issue or a lack of confidence issue or a lack of skill issue. We have to figure that out before we can start solving the problem. If we take on the task of solving a problem of time and really it's just that we don't want to learn how to do something, we're just wasting more time. We just fall further behind. All right. So, again, my way is by identifying that under ordinary circumstances, I will get anything done that's important to me within 3 weeks. And honestly, that's probably giving myself a 10-day grace period. I'm probably going to get, if it's really important to me, I'm probably going to get it done within a week or 10 days. I will, for things like this, so I will give myself a 10-day grace period and say, if it's been 3 weeks, I know for sure I'm kicking the can down the road because I'm avoiding something else. So I'm okay with extending this time frame just so that we know with certainty that we're dealing with something that's not really a time issue. Your version might be different. You know what it is. You may not give yourself a date or a time frame window to know when you're avoiding something. You will know what your telltale sign is when you just don't want to do something. You will know that inherently. Your gut's going to tell you. You may not want to admit it, but you will know as soon as you commit some time to thinking about what are my indicators that I just don't want to do something. What is my behavior? What do I start doing? How do I start acting when I just don't want to get something done? Let's identify those things and let's get out in front of this. If you really do think you have a time issue, then there's a ton of ways to save time. You can take Facebook off your phone. You can limit your screen time to 30 minutes every day or less. You can get up an hour earlier. You can skip breakfast or lunch and start, trying intermittent fasting for a while and see if that helps you out. But before we do that, let's just make sure we aren't using a lack of time as a euphemism for, I don't want to give up being the star of my business. Or I'm afraid to trust somebody else with this business that I've built. I don't want to hold employees accountable because I'm afraid they won't like me anymore, or they'll want to leave the company if I have to hold them accountable. Or I don't know if I really deserve the wealth and other benefits that come along with really being successful as a business owner. That is a very limiting thing that will ultimately look like somebody not having time. Or that we're afraid if we start really explaining to people how to do things, they will begin to learn how out of control with this whole business thing is and how little we really know. And they might think we're a complete fraud. That is a fear that many people face, which leads them to not educating their team, not delegating decisions, and they just run out of time because they're trying to do a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing because they're avoiding that fear. And there's about 10 or so other major fears that are very much like that are very common for business owners to face. And we just have to accept that this is a thing. We're going to encounter these kinds of things, and it's going to manifest itself, and it's going to look like we don't have enough time because we're afraid to turn over control, or we're afraid to face a fear, or we're afraid to learn a new skill. So when you notice that you're avoiding something, I would recommend just begin by asking why. Why are we avoiding this thing? And let's see if we can't determine what the root fear or root decision we're trying to avoid, or root fear of what skill we don't want to have to learn. Let's just see if we can't identify that. I'm telling you, in the long run, delegating some tasks here and there is much better than skipping a meal to get another hour in the day, or getting up an hour earlier and getting less sleep. In the long run, it's much better to start delegating things and taking on these fears and just acknowledging we've all been there. This is a thing we have to overcome. This is part of the transition from becoming a business owner and leaving the mindset of being an employee. This is why stage 3 is is the most difficult stage in owning a business. This is why most businesses fail in that stage, because this is hard. It is difficult. So let's not pretend like it's not. So again, if you feel that kind of knot in your stomach, or you see yourself behaving in a way that you know you're avoiding something, let's start by asking ourselves why. Let's see if we can't figure out what the root cause is. And let's just take it on. Let's figure out what it is and become aware of it. And let's start working through it. All right. So the first step of this whole process is identifying the behaviors you're going to display when you're putting off something you know you don't want to get done. For me, it's time. I know if I don't do something within 3 weeks, that means I don't want to do it for some other reason. And then I begin to ask myself why. Right? We have to understand that everyone runs out of time sometimes. This is a real thing. Time does become an issue. I'm not suggesting in any way that there are not days, weeks, and months where you just literally have too much to get done. Those are going to happen. And when it happens, there are things we can do to save time or create more time. We can change our behaviors, our daily routines, our weekly routines. There are things we can do to overcome that. Before we do that, though, I am saying we need to identify if we're really facing a time issue or not. Everyone says they're too busy, rather than saying something like, I'm avoiding this task because doing the task will force me to face a fear I really don't want to face right now. Nobody is ever going to say that. They're always going to say, I just don't have enough time. That's so much easier. We do this when we don't want to go to our 5-year-old niece or nephew's birthday party. We don't want to go somewhere else. In life, this is a great excuse to get out of doing things. I don't have time. Sorry. And people just don't argue with us. And we don't argue with ourselves. It's just a great built-in excuse in life. The problem is when you're running a business, if that becomes the pattern and we continue to avoid these scary things, we just can't progress. We can't move forward. And every business owner has been there before you, has faced the same kinds of things. So again, next thing is identify the behaviors you're going to display when you're putting off something you know you need to get done, but you just don't want to. What are those things your gut's telling you that's going to happen? When you notice that you're demonstrating one of those behaviors, take some time out, just ask why. To the best of your ability, determine the root cause, determine the root fear, determine the root decision you don't want to face, the root skill you don't want to learn. Let's see what we're trying to avoid. And once you've identified what that is, let's take it on. Let's not let that thing, whatever it is, dictate how we're going to live our lives and how we're going to let that thing limit what our business can become. Until we overcome those fears and face them and overcome them, we cannot progress forward. It's just not possible. So let's not let those things dictate how we're going to go through our business ownership journey. So that's it for this week. I hope this is helpful. Again, we'll spend more time on this. This is a big thing that many business owners face. We're going to be talking about these kinds of fears a lot. That's why this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's tons of books on overcoming fear and all this stuff. This is a real thing we have to take on, and we're going to spend plenty of time talking about this in the upcoming weeks and months. This is where it starts for me, though, is identifying when I'm using time as a euphemism for another problem I don't want to take on. So that's it for this week. I hope that was helpful. Again, if you know a friend or a colleague who owns a business in the service industry and you think this could help them, this podcast could help them out, please feel free to share that. We'd sure appreciate it. Also, if you have a few minutes, if you could give us a rating and a review. This is how you grow a podcast. You get people to share it and you get people to give us a rating and review. That's how it works. And that's what I'm asking for. I hope you guys will give me a hand in making this thing grow. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will talk to you all next week.